Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest Peter Smith, and he's here today to share with us his new book, Quantum Consciousness: Journey Through Other Realms. Now, Peter Smith is the president of the Newton Institute and trains life between life practitioners around the world. He's also the founder for the Institute of Quantum Consciousness. He has published several articles on spiritual regression and hypnotherapy, and he's a co-author of Memories of the Afterlife, the final book in the best-selling series Life Between Lives. So let's welcome to the show, Peter Smith.
It's great to be here, Marianne.
What a joy it is to have you here all the way from Australia.
Indeed.
Well, and I would love for you to share with us what started you on the path of quantum consciousness. What even made you curious about that?
Well, I guess this has been a 20-year evolution for me, Marianne. It's, I guess, something that started many years ago, maybe 25 years ago, when I was quite stressed and discovered hypnotherapy for relaxation. One thing led to another. I went through the paths of hypnotherapy and, past life regression, releasing trauma, life between lives regression, where I've been active for a long time with the Newton Institute. And then more and more quantum physics started to cross my path. And the further I looked into it, the more I could see that, wow, these guys are really doing some spiritual stuff, but they don't really know it. So for my mind, it was about trying to get into quantum physics in a way that extracted aspects of the spirituality and overlapped it, if you like, with some of my own spiritual experiences to create quantum physics, if you like, as a springboard, adding consciousness in and building quantum consciousness as an out-of-body journey.
Well, I think that's so important because when we talk about people who are probably scientists or lateral thinkers, it's easy for them to get thrown into the woods when we start talking about spirituality and consciousness, but you do it in such a way that makes sense for people who are science-minded, maybe business people. So it relates to a lot of just everyday folk.
Well, one of our people actually did one of these sessions for a quantum physicist, and we wondered how that would go. But it went wonderfully well, and to allow that person to tour the universe in their own way and to move out of their body and to actually, touch and feel some of the things that they'd been writing about for years from a quantum physics perspective was profound for them.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, that sounds like an experience that most people who are on the spiritual path are really longing for.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very simple message behind this work, Marianne, and that is that we are so much more than we believe ourselves to be. Now, people have had near-death experiences, they've had different types of regressions, they've done some sort of spiritual journey, even, experimented with some hallucinogens. But, at the end of the day, all of these are just paths to the one thing, that we are absolutely limitless and magnificent. And there's so many ways in which we can start to understand that. And what I love about quantum physics is it's the science of possibilities rather than something that is quite dead and practical.
Well, in your book, you do talk about the observer effect and entanglement. When you put those two topics in your book, was there a thought in regards to making it so that people would understand what quantum physics is all about, so they start to have this building block of information?
Well, yes, it is. I mean, if you take a spiritual aspect to some of this, like entanglement, a quantum physicist will tell us that, everything is connected and that, if you're entangled with something or if something comes together, it stays connected because there's been contact between those particles. But a spiritual person will tell you that we're all part of oneness and that the whole universe is made of energy. And that's what a quantum physicist person will say as well. The beauty of the observer effect is when we add consciousness to that, in terms of the book, we get the creator effect. And for many years we've been hearing things like we create our own realities, we manifest what we truly want. All of these things really have some sort of basis in both spirituality and quantum physics. So if we put that together in a very practical and understandable way, it means people can step forward and do it. I don't think it's really about saying, hey, I want to conjure up next week's lottery numbers or something like that. But it's about what you send out into the universe comes back to you. If you express yourself with love, love comes into your life. If you express yourself with fear, then everything is fearful and you see the world as a terrible place. So we actually control our own destiny through some of these basic energetic principles.
Well, and while some of us might know these principles, I think it really does bear repeating, because so often we do get in that trap where we're doing that negative thought. We think the world's out to get us instead of here to help us. And so it's really interesting. I felt like your book really puts people on the right path for starting to develop some of the things that they're wanting to have in their life.
You know, it's I'm a bit of a Carl Jung fan, Marianne, and many years ago I heard a quote of his which has stuck with me, and Jung said at one point that we can never truly become who we are until we release two types of conditioning. Now, the first of that conditioning is familial conditioning. Our family, the people that we grow up with, or whatever our childhood is, we're greatly influenced during those formative years. So until we actually release the conditioning of our childhood, and then further we release societal conditioning, the expectations of us, and you could list a dozen different beliefs that come from every culture. This is who you're meant to be. Ultimately, once we release those two levels of conditioning, we go through, Maslow might have called it self-actualization, whatever you want to call it, but it's like a rebirth into who we truly are. It's a securing of our deepest authenticity, and we're all here for a purpose, and we're all here to do something. And it may be, seen as large or small, but ultimately that purpose lies hidden behind some of our conditioning. Once that's gone, we're simply ourselves, universal beings moving through a limitless universe.
Do you feel that there's somewhat of a fear for people to make that jump? Because if they go, gosh, I'm going to get rid of the familia and all these other things that are kind of keeping me back, what am I going to replace that with?
Absolutely. Fear of the unknown is a characteristic of the human condition. And we live in a world that is quite fearful. As we tune into media or, you watch the news, whatever it might be, we're always being told that, there are terrible things happening and this is happening and that is happening. And it's, I think, there's probably too much of that in the media. I'd love to see them express stories of magnificence to help us find our true potential. But ultimately, I think people are not necessarily happy with change. I think there's a group of society who are usually the trailblazers, who are happy to look further and to go further and to find the things that haven't been found before. But, it's not a natural state of being to be an explorer and to leave behind that which has served us well.
Yeah, even if it hasn't served us well, it kind of is a little
we
tough
still
for
think
people.
It has.
Yeah.
There is a comfort factor. Yeah, absolutely.
What was that saying? The pig doesn't know it's in the mud until it gets out, something like that.
That's right. Well, we're a tribal people, and that goes way back, and we love to associate in groups. But, I'm sure you know the analogy of the old hero's journey. We have to leave the tribe to find out who we really are, and then we return back to the tribe if we choose to, or find another perhaps, but we come back to that tribe to bring wisdom and to show by example that by having courage and exploring, we can find things that we didn't know were there.
I don't know. I personally am all for the explorer. I love that. I love to be out there and try new things, and I think it when we look at it in regards to quantum consciousness, what's there to lose? We get to stay the same, or we actually can, as you talked about before, is kind of bloom into our true selves.
Yeah, and I think we're finding so many hidden aspects of ourselves all the time. When we first started to do this work and we started to create a space where we could make contact with ourselves in other realities, as one example of the quantum consciousness experience, I'm one of these explorers like you, Marianne, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But somebody said to me, they said, "Hey, Pete, how did you know that you could make contact with other realities?" And I thought about that for a moment. I thought, how did I know that? And it occurred to me that I never really went into the space where you couldn't. So it never occurred to me that it couldn't happen. Therefore it did. So there's that whole creator effect thing right there.
I love that. We'll have to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. I know I have all these questions, so I hope we can get through some of them because an hour goes by so quickly. Well,
Sure.
And when we look at, I know in your book you talk about the universe as a hologram. For our listeners that might be new to this work, why don't you spend a little time and explain that for us?
Well, my old friend Michael Newton, and I worked with him at the Newton Institute for some years, he put me onto a book called The Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. And he, again, was another person that looked at some of the principles of quantum physics and pulled them in. And, if we look at the holographic nature of the universe, there's a lot of stuff in Michael Talbot's book, which he wrote at the age of 36 and then I think passed away at 37. A very short life, but a very profound one for that book. He put forward a whole number of different hypotheses around the universe being a hologram. But if I take one of those, and if you look at the hologram of the small and the large being the same, we see that everywhere. We are beings, but we are a community of 50 trillion cells. Now, each of those cells has a membrane, if you like. They have a brain, they have sensations, they have a digestive system. All of those cells that make us up are their own little people, if you like. Now, we're here as well, and we're here as human beings, but we're part of humanity. And you could argue that we, in turn, are the cells of Gaia, of Mother Earth. And you could argue that she's just one planet in a solar system. That solar system is part of a galaxy, which is part of a, super galaxy, which is part of, the universe itself. Now, if you look at the holographic nature of us as people, if I go back there for a moment, and if we look at the modalities of reflexology, for example, where, parts of the hand and feet relate to the organs. If you look at iridology, and if you look at the different segments of the iris, how that particular segment, somebody can look into your eyes, an iridologist, and they can say, well, there's a liver problem, or there's a, I remember once somebody was holding trauma from a car accident, and my partner, she studied iridology, and her teacher told a story about he looked into a client's eye, and he could see a tiny little fleck on her eye, and when he looked at it in more detail, it was the shape of a car, and he thought, that's interesting. So he asked the client, tell me about the car accident. And she just looked at him. And in that moment of one question, he found the source of her trauma. So the large and the small are the same. And I remember years ago when I first became a therapist, and I've taught a lot of therapists over the years now as well, but one of the principles that I've worked with is that if somebody has an issue and they've created a lifetime of anxiety, if you can find the thing that's underneath it that started that whole safety system being put in place, because I believe that about anxiety. I don't believe it's a mental illness. I believe it's a safety system. If you can find that one particular event that was the construction of the safety system, and you can release the energy associated with that in the subconscious mind, the whole system can collapse. So when you do one thing, you can heal a whole lifetime through one event. So all around us, we see these incredible messages that the large and the small are the same. And of course, the beauty of that is if you heal one little thing, and then you extrapolate that healing out across a broader base of a lifetime or even further, like past life imprints, for example, you can do amazing things in a short space of time, working holographically.
That is just fabulous. I mean, when we look at past life and past life carryover, and when people come in with things, maybe having a fear of water and in a past life drowned, and how they can move through those challenges during this lifetime. It's quite remarkable.
Well, like all great findings, sometimes they happen accidentally. Mm-hmm. And I remember years ago when I was doing some of the Life Between Lives work, and somebody was in a traumatic past life, and they had been, if you like, persecuted in this past life. They were a healer in this life and couldn't quite get their practice off the ground, and they knew something was under the surface. So they came to see me, and we went into this past life that was holding them back, and they were persecuted by the church for being a herbalist in the Middle Ages. And she crossed over out of that life, having been burned at the stake at the time. And she was still holding some of this energy. And I said, how many times has this happened? And straight up, she said 32. I said, 32 lifetimes? She said, yep, 32 lifetimes. And we're in the in-between space, which is, beyond the incarnations and, where we can be in our expanded self and not held back by the human condition in any way. And I said to her, well, let's get all those 32 in there, just as something to say. And before I knew it, there were 32 people standing in front of her. So we went through a little healing ceremony and we sent all 32 back across time and space and released the pattern from the entire lineage of her soul. So, once you have an event like that, and always grateful to our clients who are our greatest teachers, it shows the potential of working holographically. And when you have models that embrace the entire lineage of the soul, you work with the entire lineage of the soul.
Do you see that often where there's a repeat of patterns with the clients that you work with when we talk about, how you're discussing how your client had been burned to the stake 32 times? Do you see that often? If there's a strong trauma, it might be fear, it might be persecution, it could be any of that type of energy. Normally there are more than one lifetime that relates because, and this was back to Michael Newton's work as well, we often find that people are working with patterns in this lifetime that have been long held. And the beauty of the principle of reincarnation is that you get another chance. So if you don't get a chance to solve it last time, you can come back and have another go. So if that becomes more of a pattern about not being able to quite release it as people would like to, then, absolutely, there can be long-held patterns. The analogy I use, Marianne, is that, we're sitting here and Pete's talking to Marianne and, we are chapters in a really, really long book. And this chapter that we call Pete is part of that longer book of who I really am. Now, it's important to focus on the chapter that I'm in, but why should I not be able to peek into the other chapters to help Pete? That way I can raise the value of that entire book through the chapter known as Pete. There were times when I thought that this body was a prison for my soul, but over the years I've come to know that this body is actually a portal to all sorts of things, to different realms of consciousness, to out-of-body experiences. I mean, the beauty of the quantum work and life between lives work, even past life work if you like, the beauty of that is that this body is a doorway. And I am living all of those things. It's like my body here as Pete is a representation of the entire universe itself. And, they used to say in the old days, the world is your oyster, but I think actually the universe is your oyster, and the oyster is this body itself. I love that. Well, I find it curious. So let's say someone goes through and they heal all these different past lives. They come to some realization. They've got the lesson, and they're releasing the pain. Does that release the pain for the consciousness that we're connected to as well, to some small degree?
Well, I believe that we are this expanded state of consciousness as our natural state of being. And I believe that we hold pockets of wisdom all over that all make up the entirety of who we are. The question becomes that if you release something in another time, how does it affect things here? Well, if you make a change somewhere in the engine of your car, normally there's a ripple effect to other parts of your engine. All of a sudden it starts to perform better, you get better mileage per gallon. All of these sort of things happen because you make a little change in one place. I believe that we are the sum of all that we are, and what we change in one place must affect the whole. Now, we can do that unconsciously, or we can do it consciously. For example, if we were to retrieve some of the skills from another reality or from another parallel life, whatever it might be, when we do this work and given the holographic approach that we adopt, we then send that healing to all the other aspects of ourselves consciously. Now, to do something that invokes the creator effect, which is, emerged out of the observer effect, then that makes it even more strongly shared as a resource that we can have in all our different realities. I thought that it was fascinating when we started to work with the alternative reality, and I started to sort of reflect, I guess, on, what are the changes that we can truly make there? If you go back and say somebody has a difficult birth, and there's birth trauma, and children pick up some of the feelings of their mum all the time, and I've worked therapeutically with that for decades. And if you help that little child heal in the womb, and even rather than absorb mum's distress, particularly in firstborn children, if you stop absorbing that distress and you move that child into their soul self and just bring light to that baby in the womb and then share that with mum, the ripple effect of that is significant. Going back to the baby for a moment, if we do a reset on this lifetime, if that child is born in a field of light rather than a field of distress, that must ripple through into every reality that's been created through that person's lifetime. Now, I firmly believe that. And whilst I couldn't knock on the doors of all the other realities that have formed for that person, by believing that, by creating that between me and my client, we send that through into the path of their lifetimes that splinters off into all the other realities. I really believe that we're doing something beautiful for them.
Well, I can feel the energy of that as you're talking, because you can feel the ripple of that goes out, which is quite fascinating. And it kind of brings me, I know I'm kind of moving from maybe some a little bit more advanced questions to some basic ones here, or some beginner ones, but I want to make sure that our listeners also can grasp what we're talking about as well. So when we chat about, consciousness, I think a lot of people feel that it's held in the brain. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, my basic answer to that is, really? The brain? It's about the brain? We always think it's about the brain. We think it's about the intellect. We put so much price on the intellect, Marianne, don't we? And there was so much more to us than the human brain and the intellect. And I guess I've done a lot of discoveries this way that have taken me down a different path. And I've looked at personality type and a lot of different angles to this. But to quote a couple of different people, Lynn McTaggart, in her book The Field, they talk about an experiment where they had some rats running a maze trying to find a food source. Quite a grisly experiment, because what they did was they gradually burned away parts of those rats' brains, and somehow they were able to still find the food source. Even when their motor skills were completely failing and they could hardly move, they were still heading in the direction of the food. Now, their brains were completely, totally, irreparably unfunctional, but they still managed to find the food source. I love Rupert Sheldrake's work as well, and he's written some fantastic books. He's written a book that is titled "Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home," and there's something that happens, and he talks about that. Sometimes a dog will wait at the window, and we have a cat here. And, we have an adult son living with us, and he goes off to work, and, it's his cat. And when he leaves work to come home, he may send a SMS message or something like that, home for dinner, whatever it might be. But she goes and she sits in the window, and 15 minutes later he pulls up in the drive. So there's something going on here about how we tune into, what Greg Braden may call a divine matrix of all information that's out there. But for my mind, back to Sheldrake for a moment, he talks about daffodils. And, as a very well-regarded medical scientist, he talks about how there's not enough information in the DNA of a daffodil to know that it should be that unique and beautiful shape. So where is it held? And he talks about morphic fields. He talks about the morphic fields of species. He talks about the morphic fields of individuals that then connect into a greater consciousness. For my mind, consciousness is not held in the brain because if you look at the way that we touch and we feel our way through the world, for my mind, the brain is incredibly important, but it's more of a processing mechanism. I believe that the information is stored in the consciousness of the body, of the energy field around us, because, you can almost feel fear in another person. You can feel sadness, you can feel grief. Now, I'm not processing that through my brain. I'm getting that through the connection of consciousness between my energy field and theirs. the Heart Math Institute, they talk about the torus of the energy field of the heart, and they talk about how it's like this big donut that maybe extends a meter out in every direction from the heart, and that's the field of awareness that the heart has as it moves through the world. Absolutely beautiful work that they're doing that, are very scientifically based, but they're starting to measure this stuff and also measure that the brain actually takes instructions from the heart rather than the heart listening to the brain. Now, that really changes the way that we see the human condition, because if we become heart-centered, then we have everything. If we become brain-centered and we put too much power in the intellect, we're losing so much.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Peter Smith in regards to his new book, Quantum Consciousness, Journey Through Other Realms. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest Peter Smith, and he's sharing with us his new book, Quantum Consciousness, Journey Through Other Realms. Well, Peter, before we went for break, we were talking about the divine matrix and how everything is connected, how we're all connected. And it makes such perfect sense because I get what you're saying. There have been times where I can walk into a place and I can feel what the general consciousness of that area is feeling. Or, as you described with the cat. I mean, my dog used to do the same thing. I mean, he was always attuned to when I was going to be around. So It's very fabulous how we can connect in a deeper way if we look to do that.
And I think this is getting stronger in people too, Marianne. I mean, I look at, the whole empath phenomenon, which I'm sure that you're well versed in. And I'm seeing a whole lot of kids come through my clinic. Because with all the other things that I do, I've still kept my clinic going a day or two a week. And, word of mouth, mums get together at coffee and they say, this guy helped my little girl, maybe they can help your son, etc. So I have a string of kids come through, and one thing that I find is that these children who are still elementary school, they're not even high school age, they're coming in and they're absorbing the stresses of the world, or sometimes some things that are happening in the family environment. And, I'm there with mum, and little kid's got anxiety, and we have some fun with that, and sometimes we'll draw it, and they'll draw a picture of themselves and where they feel they're holding the energy in their bodies. And these kids are so intuitive that they can draw blocks to their chakras just on a sheet of paper on the floor. It's just beautiful. But then I turn to mum and I say, what's happening at home? And her eyes drop. And she says, well, my husband and I are having a few difficulties at the moment. There's some financial pressures and all that. I say, okay. And then, the little girl or little boy, we might have released the energy that they had trapped, and they're feeling much better, and they head out to the waiting room, and I just turn to mum and I say, yeah, look, there's every chance that your little girl or boy is picking up the stress around the family. And, we have a good chat about that. And it becomes more about an understanding of the group consciousness of their family and what they can do about it. And I've had some beautiful conversations with these caring parents, and they just didn't know that energy is shared between the people that we love most. Mm. And those little kids, they're just like little sponges. They're just beautiful, but they are the new wave of humanity that's coming in with these incredible empathic skills where, they need to feel this energy of the world so that they know that they have to change it in their generation.
Well, thank goodness they have you to come to help them through these, whatever challenges or times that they're having, that they need that little extra help to get them moving forward.
Yeah, I love working with kids. They're just so pure and so beautiful, untouched by the world.
Mm-hmm. It's such a beautiful job that you're doing with that. And my goodness, your book has so much information. We will never touch it. And that's why everyone should go and pick up their own copy of Quantum Consciousness. So in your book, you talk about the remembering. Mm. And I would love for you to share with our listeners what that is.
Well, when we first started to do this work, we talked about how do we echo across time and space with some words that allow people to remember who they truly are. So whenever we take somebody on a quantum consciousness journey, Marianne, we start with some words that we call the remembering. And if you like, it's a call to their greater self, to their quantum self. We use words that allow people to actually remember who they truly are. As we know, when we come into an incarnation, the veil comes down. But these days, if you choose to, that veil can be very thin. But if you like, it's something that actualizes the quantum potential in the client. But what it does, it's almost like a spiritual invitation for them to remember more deeply who they truly are. Now, one of the things that we're really big on with the quantum consciousness work is with the people that we train, we teach them to hold the knowing. Now, if you have somebody that comes in for one of these sessions and they're sitting in a chair and you have one of our facilitators there, our facilitator holds the knowing that the being before them is this amazing, limitless spiritual being ready to explore the expanded state of their awareness. Now, from that actual perspective that's held by the facilitator, the client is empowered because they are quantumly entangled as they sit together and they move into the same energy field to do this work. And, that lifts the client into a vibration where they can explore. And it may just be the first time that they've sat with someone that absolutely, totally, and completely knows that they are the most beautiful spiritual being having a human experience. And that in itself is empowering for the people that come. And it has nothing to do with the brain.
Not at all. Not at all. That's such a powerful experience, I'm sure, that they're having.
Well, it is. And what we've found is that, rather than sort of process trauma, and we've had to retrain a lot of therapists to not actually have to find the answers for their client because the answers lie within the client themselves. Their role is simply to facilitate the magnificence of the client that allow them to meet their intentions for the session or to find their greater magnificence. So we've had to retrain a few of the therapeutic, as I had to start with myself too, of course, into a mindset where we just believe that this person is awesome and magnificent, and that once we do that, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy and they find the pieces that they need.
Well, and what a positive place to come from, as opposed to, let's see if we can find this trauma that you may or may not remember down the road.
Yeah, that's such heavy work, I think humanity deserves better these days. And, I have people that come to see me and they've been through years of counselling or psychoanalysis and, they've been looking for what's wrong. I mean, what we do is we look for what's right. We look for the magnificence of the client and we know it's there. We just gently uncover it for them so that they can feel it and experience it for themselves.
Wow, that's just so empowering. Because I could imagine if I was somebody that had gone through a lot of life traumas and had gone through places where they're still trying to figure out how to fix me, the message I'm getting is I'm broke. So there's something broken with me. And then you come and spend time with you and the facilitators that you have, the therapists. It's a whole shift in perspective.
Look, it is, and we have medical systems that are very well-meaning, but they're very limited in their perspective. And you can't argue with a medical system that can do a heart transplant, or can mend a broken leg, or can do a prosthetic limb and set things up for that so people can walk again. You can't argue that medical science has got some wonderful aspects to it, but it's limited in some ways, and particularly with the psychological stuff. And the solution to depression is to go on antidepressants. The solution to anxiety is anti-anxiety medications. People have incredible spiritual experiences, and they're diagnosed under the medical system of perhaps being delusional or having schizophrenia. So if we take a view that everybody's a limitless being, and we ask the question, what's really going on? And if somebody has depression, well, there'll be a source for that. And I worked for many years chasing down depression and finding out where it was. And, I found womb transference from mum who was depressed at the time. I found unresolved grief, because we don't grieve well in the West sometimes. Mm-hmm. Childhood traumas that had been placed in an energy field that had led to another trauma, where someone eventually shut down. Relationships that we've never recovered from because that's triggered something within us. All of these are great complexities, but, if you want to get to the emotional stuff underneath, then, many years on medication isn't necessarily the answer. If we take the holistic view that we're energetic beings and we have some energy that is stuck somewhere, let's just understand that energy and let's raise the vibration of a client into a place where the medication needs simply fall away.
Yeah, and then that way they can work on the positive aspect of where their life is going.
That's it. Yeah, if you want love in your life, then be love. It was Gandhi who said, be the change you want to see in the world. I think we should be the change we want to see in ourselves first, and then let that ripple out to others.
Wow, what a powerful experience that is, I'm sure. Now, and this is just a little bit of a side question, when people need this type of help, does it have to be done in person, or is it something that they can do via Skype? I guess I'm a bit old-fashioned in some ways, and Skype, Zoom. There's so many wonderful things, and I've been chairing board meetings at the Newton Institute for the last 10 years over Zoom and Skype. I coach a lot of therapists in different places as well. With the one-to-one contact and the depth of this, I'm still at the experimental stage on whether this can be delivered over Zoom or not. And, I've done a little bit of that and had some success, but for my mind, there's nothing really like sitting in the presence of somebody who absolutely, totally and completely believes in you. Mm-hmm. You can still do it over the internet as well. That's possible, but I guess I'm still adjusting to the new way of things. There were some things that we do. For example, we may use some physical anchoring, and we may place a hand gently on some, and so respectfully,
when somebody's fired their third eye. We may say, just drift further into your expanded magnificence and allow the answer to come. And by the loving, warm touch from person to person, from using words that echo the magnificence of the client that's in the chair, things like that just take a session into an even more expanded state where the greater wisdom comes. Now, it's hard to sort of reach down through the computer and offer something like that. Yeah. But this is the way of the world. And, great work, deep spiritual work, it can become more readily available to people that can't access it otherwise through that means. We're currently sponsoring an investigation through the Newton Institute, and we're just looking at all the angles on that. We're trying to understand, what is the potential of Skype for this type of work? And whilst we're not at a place where we're ready to endorse, we're asking all the questions and doing that now. But I must admit, I have done some work over Skype and Zoom, and I'm not completely how can I say, I'm not forbidding it in myself or others, but, for me, the jury's still out a little bit.
Well, considering that your book has a lot of scientific basis, I can understand wanting to take time and understand if that is really a good fit for what you're doing and just how that works, what the results are. Energy is energy, but at the same time, you want to have something that people will know that they get the results that they're supposed to get.
Yeah, we have to ask the right questions in this, Marianne. It's not about, how do we keep up with technology? It's what is more convenient? It's how can we make this easier? The questions need to be, what is in the greater interest of the client? What is our extension of our duty of care to people? How do we help them to shine in the best possible way? And how we do that then becomes a secondary question.
I wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of people are buying their tickets to Australia right now.
We've got a couple of guys on the listing for the US now, which is great too. So yeah, I have trained some guys in the States.
Well, and to get back to your book, Quantum Consciousness, you talk about the realms of stored consciousness. Could you share a little bit of that with us? We don't want to go through everything because, of course, we want everyone to pick up their own copy of this fabulous book. Well,
let me maybe give a quick summary of what that is, and then I can say where the stored consciousness fits. With the expanding realms of consciousness model that we use in the quantum consciousness experience, we move out through different realms that take us further and further out into an expanded state of being. Let's start with the client in the chair, and we expand their awareness out through a whole raft of realms, alternate realities, parallel consciousness, interdimensional consciousness where they exist in another body, and out into connecting with the fabric of the cosmos itself. So it's like an extended journey. And in each of these realms we meet people, aspects of ourselves, or just, if you like, vehicles of consciousness that our awareness goes to that may or may not be in human form. Stored consciousness is really important because in that realm we often do a lot of healing. So when we expand out of the present consciousness, as we call it, and we use the remembering that we spoke of earlier and some other techniques just to allow the client to release their firm grip on time and space as we know it here in the physical realm, we move into stored consciousness where, and I'm speaking to you now and I'm 54, okay? So in my stored consciousness, I have access to everything in my timeline, whether it be my 8-year-old, my 24-year-old, my 60-year-old. All of them are there in my stored consciousness, and we ask in the interests of healing and for the benefits of wisdom if there are any other aspects of me that want to come forward in that realm, which will be different ages. Now, in my old days as a therapist, if a 5-year-old was to show up, I'd say, oh, here we go, a bit of inner child work coming here. Let's get this child and hug this child and help them. But no, because we've established a philosophy of doing this work in a higher vibration, that 5-year-old might be coming forward to remind us of freedom. Yeah. You know, you might have a 21-year-old that comes forward and reminds them what it was like when they travelled through Europe and slept on trains and just felt what it was like to be completely free in the world and to experiencing and have the courage to do that. So we have these beautiful reminders across the timeline that we're in. And even by sharing a personal example, when we do some teaching, we always do live demonstrations. And, every now and then, in the interests of all of this, I donate my body to the greater good. So I was actually in the demonstration as the client in front of a class. And it was really interesting because I had the Quantum Consciousness book at that stage, and it had been self-published. It had done well just through word of mouth. And when I was in this deep and beautiful space in my stored consciousness, my 8-year-old came forward and he took me by the hand and he took me back to an experience at the local swimming pool. And he took me up on the blocks. And when I was 8 years old, I learned to dive off the blocks. And he says, he took me by the hand and we stood on those blocks. And he says, do you remember this when you were 8 years old? And you didn't want to, I was about 3 or 4 feet up these blocks into the pool. And when you're 8 years old, that's about half your height, so it looks like a lot. And he said, remember, you just have to have the courage to jump. You just have to have courage to jump. So after that, because I'd been considering sending the book to Llewellyn to publish them because I knew them through the other work at the Newton Institute. And I was umming and ahhing and all that sort of stuff, so he encouraged me to jump off the blocks, and we did that together, he and I. And that's why we're having this conversation today, I guess.
Well, Llewellyn has some fabulous authors, and I'm not surprised that your book was immediately picked up by them. It's a fabulous read and has such great information that it kind of has you look at life in a different way. So I'm very much appreciative of that. And my goodness, what a journey. And I love how you talk about where you saw your 8-year-old self, that basically it wasn't, you needed to go and comfort, but it was more about a message that was there for you.
Well, he was my teacher. Teachers come in many forms, don't they?
Mm-hmm. They sure do. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. My goodness. Well, and gosh, let's see if I can pick one that's a question here that I have that's a little bit easier than the average bear. Let's see. Because I've got so many. I have these little tags all over your book. That's just,
okay.
How about this? We talk about, I know you in your book, you talk about the expanded state of awareness. Mm-hmm. So what do you mean by that?
Well, one of the big journeys for me as a long-term hypnotherapist was, for years, and I was trained traditionally back in the old days, Marianne, as well. And, let's go down into trance. We go down from our beta brainwave patterns down through our alphas where we enter the subconscious, and really deep work can be done in theta, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But like we were talking about before, none of this is really about the brain. It's like we establish some sort of a trance state that shows up in the brain. Now, that was the first shift for me as a hypnotherapist to say, well, I'm not actually inducing a trance in the brain. I'm actually inducing a trance in the body, and then the brain follows. But maybe I'm inducing a trance, maybe I'm settling the energy of the greater energy field here. And, I wasn't thinking like the average hypnotherapist here because I was challenging everything that I've been shown. And then I went one step further and I said, well, why are we going down anyway when we should be going out into the universe? So I horrified some of my old students from the early days when in a workshop once they'd come back and they'd learned some of the quantum consciousness techniques after they'd been hypnotherapists in practice for many years. And I used to draw that old iceberg type thing where above the surface you've got the conscious mind, and underneath you've got the subconscious with its different levels and all that sort of stuff. So I turned the whole thing upside down, and I drew an upside down iceberg with this little tip at the bottom, calling that the present consciousness, with arrows going out into the universe. I'd say, well, this is what we're doing now, and they're just looking at me. I could see their heads trying to turn their heads upside down and all sorts of stuff to go back to the model that they were so familiar with that I taught them in the olden days. So for my mind, it's about that. It's about turning things around and doing it like we haven't done it before. When I talk about expanded states of awareness, the expanded states are things that happen beyond the body, beyond the reach of the human intellect, beyond the conditioning of the brain, beyond, we are just this physical body. Well, no, we are not. We are a doorway to so much more. So let's kick that doorway open and get the hell out there and find the things that we need to that, bring richness and depth and real passion and purpose into your lifetime.
You may have solved the problem of most people not wanting to go and have hypnotherapy or do any of that type of work for the same fact of going down can sound a little scary. It's like, ooh, where am I going to end up,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's a lot of connotations with hypnosis as well. I mean, I no longer call this hypnosis. These are really out-of-body journeys. Mm-hmm. And, back in the old days when I first became a hypnotherapist, Marianne, I'd get all the usual questions. Are you going to make me cluck like a chicken? Or, are you going to levitate me? What you going to do there? I said, well, if you want to, I used to say to clients, well, if you want to cluck like a chicken, there's really nothing I can do to stop you because you're really in charge of it all. They're just looking at me a little funny.
Not quite ready for that response, right?
No, that's right. That's right.
Oh, my goodness.
So the other thing they'd say is, I can't be hypnotized. And I'd say, oh, okay, so you can't do alpha brainwave patterns. So, okay, can you sleep? Well, yeah, I sleep every night. Okay, so you can do delta. Every night on your way down to delta brainwave patterns, you pass through alpha. So you can be hypnotized if you want to. Let's have a conversation about why you choose not to, because ultimately it's down to your free will. And it really changes the conversation and becomes quite helpful, really, as we try to identify why they don't trust enough.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously it's a fear thing that's being activated there.
Yeah.
Coming up as, resistance.
Yeah, but I do believe that expanded states of awareness are our natural state because it's what we return to when we leave the body. I believe that, when we go to sleep of a night and the body's at rest, I believe our consciousness explores as well. We have those dreams that we seem like such real experiences. And we get messages, and we get all of this sort of stuff. Now, all of that can't come from within us. All of that's got to come from, beyond us. So our consciousness is out there every night anyway, I feel.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. It's interesting when you have those out-of-body experiences where everything feels so vivid. You can remember it no matter how long time has passed. It's much different, in my opinion, than a dream, because you're participating in something bigger than us.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think I have time for one more question here. And you touched on it briefly earlier. We were talking about the holographic healing as something that can happen through this. What is that?
Well, there's an example that I use in the book. Like, say you've got, a manuscript, a document, and you've got the word amazing in it. And you can do one of those global searches and you might have 47 different amazings in that document. Now, if you choose to replace that with awesome, okay, you move from amazing to awesome and you click one button and awesome turns up in 47 places in that document. Ultimately there's something here about holographic healing that we don't need to go to every place that holds a certain vibration. If we change the vibration in simply one place and then we ripple that out to everywhere else where that vibration is held, we can change things holographically because the large and the small are the same. It's like you're rewriting a computer program and you upload it and it changes everything everywhere in that program. So we are like that. We have these messages like I was talking about iridology before and reflexology. We are connected. We are quantumly entangled with all those other events, if you like. Every time I was nervous as a child, I've just got to access one of those and then by my own intention send that new vibration of, courage or comfort or whatever it might be to all the other places where that vibration sits. It was Nikola Tesla that said, if you really want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency and vibration. I mean, that's simply who we are, and why not use that to our advantage whenever we can? The days of sort of doing things one at a time, I think, are gone. Energetically, it all connects.
Thank goodness for that, because, there's when you go through a healing, energetic healing, it would be nice to have several things addressed as opposed to one at a time,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It would, I hope I don't put the therapist industry out of business because there's lots of great well-meaning people that are there, but I think some of the processes and some of the models that we have the processes are slow and some of the models are out of date because they don't involve the whole magnificence of who we are.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It does seem a little bit antiquated in some of their approaches. And maybe they need to take a look at that. And, I think having people like you to go to where there's other viewpoints and opinions and work that can be done can be so helpful for people.
Yeah, look, I think you summarised it beautifully before, Marianne, when you said that, we don't need to focus on what's wrong anymore. If you go looking for the shadows, you're going to find more shadows. But if you're going looking for the light, then you just find the light, and then the shadows just aren't there.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. My goodness, Peter, we could talk all day about your book, Quantum Consciousness. I love it. And
Thank you.
That's why it's part of our book club this month. And I would love for you to share with our listeners where they can connect with you, be part of your community, and just learn more about you and your work.
Okay. Well, instituteforquantumconsciousness.com is our main website. I've also got a private website just for me as a practitioner, quantumconsciousness.com.au, as we have in the websites down here. Mm-hmm. So that's ways that you can have a look at what we're doing. There's a few case studies there, some events that may be coming up. I may be in the States next year as well, around March. I've been asked to speak in a couple of places in March. So there's a chance that I may make my way over there soon, which is great. So, but by all means, come through the website, drop us a note. We'd love feedback on anything that you see on those sites or even on our interview today. It's always great to hear from people, to know if we're offering information that people most want to hear. But yeah, more than happy to connect with people and talk more about what I do because, I just love this so much. I think we find our path in life eventually, and I've done a few other different things on the way through before I got further into this work. But it's like there's a pull. When you find something that's a calling, it's like you get pulled into it, and then you're in the middle of all of this, and you look around and you say, how did I get here? And I think we're often guided by something far greater than ourselves, and that might just be us.
Well, and thank goodness for that, because it's easy to see that you're very passionate about this work. And my goodness, you carry a certain energy. I hope you reach back out to us when you're here in the States. We'd love to hear about it and share it with everybody. Peter.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And my goodness, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thanks, Marianne. It's been great to have a chat. And, I've really enjoyed coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's been so inspiring to spend this time with you and, of course, to talk about your new book, Quantum Consciousness, Journey Through Other Realms. Again, if you'd like to connect with Peter, you can at his website, quantumconsciousness.com.au. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Thursday, Friday, and Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.